can't quite make a sound on your clarinet or saxophone. You were making sounds the other day, but maybe not so much today. So here are some things that may be the cause of this. Number one is your reed. That's pretty much the biggest issue, is going to be your reed. So if your reed is brand new, you just opened it out of the case, then your reed is likely going to be a little bit hard and it just needs to be broken in. So just make sure that it's nice and moist. Pop it in your mouth for maybe a little bit longer than you normally would, and then it should be good to go. Now, if your reed is too old, that can also be an issue. It starts to look a little warped, like it's not a straight line like this one is. It looks a little wavy. That means that your reed is way too old and you just need to throw that away because that reed's life is done. So then you'll have to get a new reed, and that's a-okay. If your reeds are chipped, sometimes because this very thin top is so fragile, they can chip or they can break, they can split. If that happens, you're gonna have to throw that reed away because that will not work. It'll work for a little while. It's okay to use for maybe a practice session, but in general, it's not gonna work for a very long time, so you might as well just throw that reed away. If your reeds are moldy, throw them away. If they start to look green or black or like kind of fuzzy, throw it away, because otherwise you will get sick and we don't want that to happen. And then, yeah, it's just bad. So throw that reed away, get it as far away from you as possible. So if your reed is not placed on the mouthpiece quite correctly, that can also be a really big issue. So remember, at the very top of the mouthpiece, this is my clarinet mouthpiece, the very top, you want to see just a little bit of that black line. You don't want the reed up too high, because that'll make it nearly impossible to play. And you don't want the reed too low, because again, that won't allow it to play very well. So you want it to be right in the center, and you want to see just a little bit of that black tip right at the top. You want to make sure that the rails on the mouthpiece, so the rails are these lines right here, those should be surrounding directly on the reed. So you should have the reed be touching those rails exactly, because that's where it comes in contact with the mouthpiece and that's where it'll vibrate. So that's the best place to have that reed, just making sure that's nice and center and you see a little bit of that black mouthpiece right at the top. It's the same for saxophone too. You want to see just a little bit of that black mouthpiece and then you put your ligature on. So remember that your ligature, you want to make sure that your ligature goes underneath the curved line on both saxophone and clarinet mouthpieces, because otherwise that will constrict the vibrations up too high and then you won't be able to make a good sound that way either. Something not having to do with reeds or mouthpieces would be if you have something inside of the bell or inside of the instrument itself. So a cleaning cloth. When we store our clarinets and our cleaning cloths, we don't have a whole lot of room, so we tend to kind of ball up our cleaning cloth and put it in the bell. Make sure to take that out, because otherwise you won't make a very good sound. Other things that can happen, so like for saxophone, sometimes our cases aren't super great, so then the mouthpiece might accidentally fall, or the mouthpiece cap might fall into the bell and then get into the instrument. So just like checking inside of the instrument and making sure there's nothing in there, that will really help save you some time and frustration trying to get that good sound out. For clarinet, another issue is your fingers aren't covering the holes. So clarinet has these holes, these wonderful holes, similar to the recorder that you might have played in your music classes. Now, to get a really good sound, you have to make sure that your fingers are totally covering the holes. If you leave a little gap, do you see for this finger here? If you leave that little gap, then air escapes and then you'll squeak and squawk and then sound won't come out. So making sure you're totally covering these holes. And then a little bit later, when you start using your pinky keys, same for saxophone, just making sure that your pinkies are really pressing down on those keys enough to seal those pads. If you still aren't making sound after all of that, there could potentially be a pad leak. These pads do wear down over time, especially if they aren't clean. If you don't run a cleaning swab through, then that moisture collects and then it starts to break down the pads. So that can happen over time. This is kind of like a last resort. If that does happen, then you should take it into the shop and then have the West Music or whatever shop you go to, have them take a look and then repair those pads for you. Then you'll be playing and back to clarinetting or saxophoning in no time.